Welcome to Mysteries of Superstition Mountain. I'm Larry Hedrick, where we bring the past into the present for our future viewers. Today we have another great story by Hank Scheffer.
Well, there have been a lot of people ask me over the years about telling more stories about men who lost their heads over the Superstition Mountains and the Lost Dutchman Mine. So we're going to tell you another one right now about a fella who lost his head. Of course, he's dead, but he lost his head. Well, Wayne Ellsworth Bernard, is best known as Barney, was a storyteller and adventurer who had been in the Apache Junction Superstition Mountain area very early on in the development of Apache Junction. Barney was born on August 8th of 1886 and was yet another transplant from his native Manchester, Iowa in the Midwest to the wild and woolly west of the Arizona Territory. Around 1906, Barney arrived in Mesa, Arizona Territory, looking for a job with one of the several cattle outfits where he might find work. He threw himself into the Western lifestyle with a vengeance. He created the famous B&B Guest Ranch. His adventures in and around the superstitions were perfect for his storytelling, whether singing a song or telling a tale. He wrote about the Lost Dutchman Mine just like everybody else of the time. However, he was especially interested in the murders and missing person stories that occurred in those days. He even numbered the occasions of death and mayhem. Everybody had a number. If they lost their head or got killed or died up in the mountain, they got a number. This particular story I'm about to tell you, from all the murders on Barney's ever-growing list, was that of James A. Cravey, or Cavey, depending on whose expert opinion you want to go by, was number 20. But it was the most puzzling and perhaps the most revealing, depending on your point of view. And here's how that story goes. On July 16th, 1947, James A. Cravey entered the mountain looking for the elusive Lost Dutchman gold. He had told friends that he had a vision that revealed exactly where the phenomenally rich gold mine was located. Apparently, he had tried reaching the area with pack animals in his dream, or whatever it was, but was unsuccessful. In fact, one of his friends, Mr. C.W. Vanderfloot, tried to convince Cravey he was not able to go into the Superstition Mountains. He shouldn't even be there. After all, he was 62 years old and crippled. One arm was almost useless, and he had a leg that troubled him from an affliction that forced him to retire early from his career as a photographer. For all intents and purposes, he had no business venturing into the Superstition Mountain for any reason, and certainly not on his own, at any rate. So, anyway, that spring in 1947, Cravey contacted and later contracted a Mr. Edwin W. Montgomery, who was the president of the Southern Arizona Airways. It was a small company which operated helicopters out of Tucson and Phoenix, and he wanted him to haul him and 2 weeks' supply of grub and water into the designated spot that he'd had in his vision. This was the very spot where his vision had told him to go, a sandbar in the Barge Canyon. Mr. Montgomery and his wife related that they enjoyed a small but steady source of income to their helicopter company from flying people in all the time to the Superstition Mountains to look for the Lost Dutchman Mine. Now, I have to tell you a story that I've related to folks a couple times, that going into Blacktop Mesa and the Bluff Springs area, so many people have been into Blacktop Mesa and digging holes and rooting around in caves that it got to the point where the rangers in the Superstition Wilderness would tell you, don't go over to that place or go into any of those caverns because it's been weakened so much by people digging holes in the mountain that it's actually lowered itself. It's ready to cave in. The whole mountain's going to fall down right within itself. So don't go over there. It's really a dangerous place to go. What's really bad is I have people who really believe that. So don't go to Blacktop Mesa. Whether it's going to fall in on you or not, don't go over there. In every case, each of the passengers using the helicopter, the pilot was sworn to secrecy, but they all wanted to be landed in approximately the same place. Then, of course, the contract would say that he would come back after a week or 10 days or so, pick them up and fly them out. Usually disappointed. James Cravey's arrangement was pretty much the same as everybody else's. It was no different. Pilot Montgomery flew Cravey to that point in LaBarge Canyon. Ironically, it was only a few miles from the spot where Adolph Ruth had camped. Yeah, we know what happened to him, don't we? If you don't, you can go up and watch it on one of our other stories. They unloaded Cravey's equipment in that same area. Well, the 10 days passed quickly, and the helicopter returned to Cravey's camp. Unfortunately, Cravey was nowhere to be found in camp. The pilot flew up and down all the canyons around the area, but Cravey was nowhere to be found. Days before taking off, and having already sworn the pilot to secrecy, Cravey was dismayed to hear an announcement on the radio and read an account in the daily papers of exactly what he was going to do, where he was going, what he was doing. Unfortunately, James had already paid the agreed amount up front for the helicopter services. He decided to take the risk anyway and head into the mountains. Once in the appointed area, the pilot made his set down, assisted in packing the grub and water up to high ground where it was completely covered with a tarp. Cravey, this retired commercial photographer, secured a 2-gallon canteen of water and enough food for 2 days, and off he headed for the Superstition. He didn't even do anything about setting up camp. He just had all the stuff piled there and off he went. Pilot took off and came back to Phoenix. Well, on August 2nd, as per agreement, Montgomery returned, and he found Cravey's cache of food still intact, just as it was when he left. Cravey had apparently never returned to it. Well, the pilot left, and he returned to Phoenix, and he went over to the sheriffs of Maricopa and Pinal County to notify them. And then Montgomery, their people took off, and they came back to the area to hunt some more. They set the helicopter down by the site of Cravey's camp, or what would have been his camp. It was intact. No more than 2 days' supply of food and water had been used, according to one account. Other accounts say that nothing had been used. Missing were Cravey's mining pick, his rifle, his canteen, and a shovel. They again flew up and down the nearby canyons at a low level, but found no trace of James Cravey from the air, nor did either of the sheriff's ground parties find anything or any sign of James Cravey. On August 6th now, Barney Bernard, that fellow we talked about earlier, guided the new posse with bloodhounds into the cache. The dogs easily picked up Cravey's trail. Barney's bunch followed the track for about 3 hours. That is when they hit upon their first real evidence. In descending a slope, they found where Cravey had thrown his bedroll away. The next thing that came off was his rut sack, his grub sack. That was thrown off. And then finally, of all things, his canteen that was nearly full of water. Now, bear in mind, we're in another situation where it's July. And the one singular thing you don't want to lose is your water. And here is old Cravey, he threw his away. Well, 50 feet further on, the hounds started to mill around in circles. they had completely lost the trail. They couldn't find the scent anywhere. And aside from some broken buckbrush, there was no further evidence at hand at all to even show that Cravey had been there. The searchers were pretty close to the Dawn's trail at that point. So they radioed the truck to come around and pick them up. They just about had enough of the searching for one day, so they were ready to come home. But while waiting for the truck, they decided to follow a ridge downward a little bit further. And Barney would tell you to his dying day, he swore up and down that on the August 6th, there was absolutely nothing that gave a hint to Cravey ever having been there on that ridge. At that point, though, the search was struck. They loaded up everybody and headed for the barn. Well, the Cravey puzzle stood in that posture for some 9 months or so. But then the Arizona Republic published the following dispatch, and I'll read it to you. Mesa, February 21, 1948. Discovery of James A. Cravey, 62-year-old retired photographer from Polk Street, Phoenix, who disappeared in the rugged Superstition Mountains last July while seeking the legendary Lost Dutchman mine, was reported tonight by 2 Arizona visitors. Wow, that's one sentence. They are Captain R.F. Perrin, U.S. Army retired, and Lieutenant Commander William F. Clements of Chicago, guests of the Sunset Trail Ranch, 11 miles east of here. The 2 men reported finding the skeleton of a man minus the skull late this afternoon, 2.5 miles south of Weaver's Needle, while they were on a one-day hike in the area. Because of the hour, they did not search for the skull, but brought the man's wallet back to Sunset Trail Ranch. Identification was made through papers in the wallet. Sheriff Cal Bowles was notified in Phoenix. Bowles said Sheriff Lynn Early of Pinal County will organize a party to pick up the skeleton tomorrow morning. Cravey is the 20th person known to have lost his life while looking for the fabled lost mine in the Superstitions. Number 20. That's what Barney said, so it must be true. The Pinal County Sheriff and the 2 men who had found Cravey's body went into the mountains the next day and found that skull. It was found at the head of a canyon, directly due east of Weaver's Needle. No one has ever been discovered who had killed Mr. Cravey, or why his body, like that of Ruth and Yahez Clapp, was beheaded. I guess that's just another mystery of the Superstition Mountains. Thank you for watching this episode of Mysteries of the Superstition Mountains.